On radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and the MGoBlog Roundtable crew with us. For those listening on radio, you heard Seth. He joined us already in the last part. Seth, hey, man, we get you go overtime every single week. I need to acknowledge that. Appreciate you for engaging in the conversation early. How are you this morning?
I'm good. I think people should know it's just because I want to get on and test my audio setup beforehand, and I just and then I'm like, hey guys, what's going on? And here we go.
And if you're watching this on the stream, that you see the diehard Michigan guy that Craig is wearing different colors this morning, representing the opposition. Bowling Green. How are you this morning, Craig?
Yeah, I'm fine. As people know, I'm friends with Scott Leffler and his wife Amy, and so I've been dreading this week for a long time. Is all I can say.
We're putting you and Jack Harbaugh in a corner. You can come back next week.
Yeah, it's house money. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I know. It well said, Brian. It is house money.
And then that voice you just heard, the man that started it all over at MGoBlog, Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you?
Fired up. Got to beat those Falcons.
Right. We definitely are going to dedicate the majority of the hour to Michigan, but can't ignore the biggest story. It was the biggest story in sports until Aaron Rodgers goes down after 4 snaps, and now it shares that headline. Mel Tucker, news broke early Sunday morning that he was suspended based on a sexual harassment claim from Brenda Tracy, who folks who listen to this show obviously know well. She came in studio one year. She came to the Victor's Lounge. She's been on the air as a guest. We've talked to her several times. So she is the complainant here. A charge that was levied back in December. An investigation that commenced after that. One whose that a report came from back in July, but news didn't break until this weekend when apparently, allegedly, supposedly, Brian, someone leaked Brenda's name, and she responded to her name being leaked.
Yeah, and this conflicts with Michigan State's story somewhat. Is like the AD said that they are not privy to the contents of the report. So it's difficult to imagine someone inside a Title IX office leaking this, because if the accuser doesn't want their name out there, you shouldn't put their name out there, right? So there's a reason that the regents are trying to investigate who actually leaked the name. But yeah, as soon as the contents are revealed, it's really just a matter of how much of Mel Tucker's buyout is he about to get. And he released a statement that for some reason name checked Jim Harbaugh and calls this upcoming hearing basically a farce. And you don't do that if you're ever thinking that you're going to coach college football again. He's really just angling for whatever he can get from his contract at this point. And so it goes.
Yeah, I've been saying this is about the post game. He knows he's fired. I don't even know that he's going to show up at the hearing. And so this is a lawyer question for you, Craig.
Yeah.
His contention was that this didn't fall under Title IX, which, as Craig, Seth, I don't quite understand his. He tried to say it only applies to student conduct. He also tried to say, unless he's trying to say that she wasn't an MSU employee, but she was a vendor. So why wouldn't this? What kind of case does he have for this not being a Title IX case?
I'm not 100% sure that it is a Title IX case. I'm no expert on Title IX, but it doesn't matter because the practical reality is he's not going to coach at Michigan State again, and he's going to have a hard time, at least in the foreseeable future, getting certainly a head coaching job anyplace else.
Well, for Mel Tucker, it is relevant because he's got a fully guaranteed $80 million contract.
Well, that's a different question, and I suspect that negotiation may be ongoing, and if Michigan State hardballs Mel, there'll be a litigation filed, and and
Well, I mean, there's definitely going to be litigation filed.
not
Like
necessarily, not
Well,
necessarily.
I mean, what does
They-
Mel have
they-
to lose, right?
No,
Like-
what Michigan State. I have a friend who does this sort of stuff, and he suggests that it's naive to believe that negotiations aren't already happening as to
Yeah.
what the buyout will be. I suspect that Michigan State would be more than willing to give him quote something. Now, this friend suggests it'll be somewhere between 20 and 40 million. I felt that was high, but
That is amazing.
we'll see. But whether it's the question of whether it's a Title IX violation or not is sort of falls into the basket of if
So-
my aunt had wheels, she'd be a trolley car.
So here's a
It's-
question.
yeah.
Would you rather have $80 million and have to coach Michigan State football for the next 8 years, or $30 million with which you can do anything at all? You don't have a job anymore.
Well,
I mean,
to
to
me,
me, that's a pretty clear
Sit back
choice.
and smoke your
That's a-
cigars, Mel, with $30 million.
as a person who's never made any money and who's struggling to try and get our bathroom or kitchen remodeled, yeah, that's easy. I guess an easy choice for me. And as a person who'd like to give a lot of money away if I could, but I don't know in when you're making those sorts of dollars what it feels like to you. So I don't know the answer.
Yeah, the troubling thing. So let's end with talking about how they handled it, because we all agree he's going to get fired. I think his statement was, as I said, as Brian said, this was about the settlement after and how big will it be. And that's what the Title IX argument is about, frankly. Saying this is a personal thing, and you are you're trying to interfere in my private life, and you're firing me for it. This is why, by the way, I think it was important for whoever put it out there. If their intention wasn't what Seth said, it's pure, we can't have this going on, we want to bring light to it. I believe there are some that are saying, hey, you know what? Get this out there. This is a means to an end to get rid of him because he's bringing embarrassment and shame to the university. That's where it being public actually helps their case. As embarrassing as it might be, it certainly would save you some money. But what about how they handled it? He coached 2 games, right?
Well,
and then once it goes public, now he can't coach anymore. What about that?
So the thing is like there is the claim that they know that the report is done and they don't know what the contents are. So the question, first of all, is like, okay, the report was done in July. Why is the hearing in October? Right?
Good question.
It's not a court of law. I think part of Mel's objection is he's not allowed to cross-examine. There's not a lot of preparation that needs to go into this. Why wasn't the hearing in August? Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The other thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me is this whole process. How are you supposed to have an investigation and then the people who are in charge of making decisions for the university aren't allowed to know what the contents of that investigation are?
See, so this is another lawyer question, because I
Yeah,
saw one
I
lawyer
don't know,
say
man.
they are barred from releasing information publicly, but they aren't barred from talking about it internally. So I don't know what
It's
there.
institutional policy,
lawyer.
and I think that I think that they're BSing. Because first of all, I don't understand why it wasn't a Title IX investigation, except for there's certain policies you have to follow if it's Title IX, which they might have wanted to get around. One thing that Mel Tucker is probably right about is that these kinds of hearings, because I at least I know that like they happen in Michigan. I've dealt with woman who runs SAPAC at Michigan, and these can be a real, for both sides, are terrible. Right, the system that they have for that is awful.
Hey, Seth, why are you saying this isn't a Title IX thing? Because
That was something that Mel Tucker claimed in his thing, is that
the USA Today article
Yeah.
is just littered with references to MSU's Title IX office. So
right. Well,
whatever
the Title IX
Tucker
office
is
is going to have to investigate it. I'm saying who's going to be running the hearing. If they moved it out of the Title IX office, it's the only. That's why I don't know what I'm talking about after that point. If they've moved it out of the Title IX office for this hearing, then I don't know what the structure of the hearing is or why they would move it or anything, because
I don't.
you're out of policy range at this
It's
point.
not, Seth. The objections that Tucker lodged in the statement he released through his lawyer are very familiar objections to anyone who's been familiar with the Title IX process.
Okay.
So this is something that, like, everything he was saying is like, okay, I've heard this before from people who feel that they've been railroaded by this process and went to the media. So I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah, and as I say, I'm not a Title IX expert. I don't know what these procedures are. I've never been involved in a Title IX hearing. So I haven't paid sufficient attention to give you a good answer. In the end, I don't think it's very relevant because Michigan State is not going to employ him as head coach.
I mean, the leak is very strange because it feels like if you knew about this in July and you wanted Mel Tucker gone, you would have said it immediately, right? I think this is worse for Michigan State than any alternative. Like 2 games into the season, this comes out. You had like a month before the hearing. You could have gotten halfway through the season before it came out. It's just chaos now. I mean, you have an interim head coach. You're bringing in Mark D'Antonio from the bullpen, which is like, yeah, that's new MSU. Like, for me, this is like the worst of all possible worlds for Michigan State, especially because you think Tucker's not going to use this as leverage in his lawsuit. Like,
he will.
Yeah.
I mean,
So whoever leaked this, it doesn't make sense from I want to get rid of Mel Tucker and get out of the buyout, because I think the leak hurts Michigan State's case for not paying the buyout because they violated policies that are in place for good reasons. So
the only person that could possibly help is somebody who, for whatever reason, doesn't want Mel Tucker coaching another football game and doesn't want to wait until October.
You know who?
Mel Tucker coached the Michigan game.
All right, I know who it is. It's Mel Tucker. I figured it out.
Look, here's what makes sense to me as far as 2 things. You said, why would they do this? Doesn't mean the leaker is completely up to speed on all of the potential pitfalls of the strategy. Doesn't mean that they're super bright. It just means that they saw a means to an end. But what makes sense to me about why it would go 2 games into the season if they knew about it in July, I think there's a contingent of MSU leadership that didn't know until recently. Some knew, some didn't. And when those who didn't know found out, someone in that orbit was the person or people that decided they were going to leak it to the media. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, because you're right. I mean, why would they wait until into the season to do this?
Yeah.
If they knew back in July? I do believe some of them didn't know until very recently.
The other possibility is that Tracy's name was kind of in the whisper network without any details of the report being known. And they know that there's an investigation, and then it's like, oh, well, he's been hanging out with Brenda Tracy a lot or calling Brenda Tracy a lot. I don't know. But the whole situation here is a little bit odd. And I don't necessarily think it means that Michigan State isn't following the procedures they're supposed to follow. Although there was a Lansing State Journal article about how 48 hours later they hadn't released any sort of protocol that Mel Tucker was supposed to follow, which in the aftermath of the Nassar stuff is pretty bad. So,
well, I think the biggest indicator of his concern over it being a Title IX issue is when he lied about where he made the infamous call from, where he said he was at his house when really he was on a function related to Michigan State, and I think down in Florida or something. He had flown on a team plane. He had flown on a private plane and all of that stuff. It was, So that's why he lied about that.
Well, and then he makes some sort of assertion in his interviews that Paul Levine from ESPN is investigating whether Brenda Tracy's story about being gang raped is true. That is sociopathic.
Yeah.
That is disqualifying from everything, in my opinion.
This is how these people. It's a open and shut, clear case of sexual harassment, and like this. I mean, that's how these people operate. That is like that's the exact function, is try to scare the person, try to like turn around, try to like. And Brian, you are absolutely right when you say like the thing that he wrote is 99.999% BS. It's just, even like the way he defends himself about their relationship is taking things that somebody would say to a creep, and taking it to mean that like, oh, he meant she wanted relationship with me. That's kind of how that's how they act.
I mean, there's an assertion in the USA Today article that in his interview for the investigation, he asserted that Brenda Tracy was just trying to bilk Michigan State out of money, which is crazy. Do you think this makes Brenda Tracy's life easier? No. Brenda Tracy is doing this because it's the right thing to do, and she has to do it because of her story and her life. But do you think this is going to make it easier for her to get speaking gigs on campuses? No. This is bad for her, but she did it anyway.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, but I also don't want to just sort of brush away anything Mel says. As I try and say in the past, I want to hear his testimony. I want to hear his cross-examination. I want to hear the whole thing.
I mean, at this point, he can be telling the truth about
what
the relationship being he can be telling the truth about the relationship being entirely consensual, and he should still be turbo fired.
Right. Yeah, that's what.
Well,
that's
the
that's
best
what I
possible
said
reading.
before.
Yeah.
That's what I said before. But he
Yeah.
could, you know,
that's where
what
I am
said.
with it. That's where I am with it, because I mean, there are things in that report about the nature of their relationship that, frankly, I find confusing. So I don't know what their relationship was, but whatever it was, it's a fireable offense. It just
there is
doesn't.
a power relationship here. Mel Tucker is the football coach who's in charge of this operation, and Brenda Tracy was a vendor who came and provided a service. Now, the service was trying to talk to his players about sexual assault, ironically, but whatever her position was, she is in a position that is beneath Mel Tucker when she comes in and works for Michigan State, even if it's a contract work. That is a power relationship. You cannot pursue relationships when there is a power imbalance, because that is where this comes from. And then when people who do that are doing it because they want the power relation to be part of the relationship, that is, as Brian said, sociopathic.
Well, I never want to speak generally. I always want to talk specifically, and in this sense, I demur somewhat. I always want to talk about what happened in this particular case and what people
I know, but we're not
in
their
this
lawyers.
particular case,
But
and
Craig, we're
not
not their
what
we're not their
generally
lawyers.
happens in the culture. Right.
Our job is to talk generally right now, because our question is, what do we want our institution to act like? What do we want other institutions to act
Completely
like? And
different
what do we want
issue.
life to be like because sexual assault is rampant in this country, and it's rampant in the institutions that we work in, and we want to see an example.
A different question. Different questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. Let's talk Michigan. Right. The Wolverines go out and win as we thought they would in convincing fashion, 35-7. JJ is just off to an unbelievable start as far as efficiency is concerned. It's my contention that there's no quarterback in the country playing better right now, even if their stats are gaudier. You look what he's done at Michigan so far this year, and I put him right up there with the best. And then the defense really, really comes roaring out in week 2. So it gives you a lot to be encouraged about. And then there's the talk about the running game, and how ironic is it here? They need to run the ball better. To hear fans say that, it's just slightly funny, right? But it is on point in that there needs to be improvement there. So we will dive into those topics coming back on the other side. Mr. Weintraub, as we get to a break, you want to be a little generous, man? Let me see you. Let me see your face over there. Okay, I hear the music. That works.
Yeah,
all right. So
probably shouldn't have played it through the YouTube, but I'll deal with the consequences later.
Yeah, if you want to join us inside the Bud Light Victor's Lounge Saturday, starting at 3:30, all you got to do is be caller number 7 at 734-998-1050. Again, 734-998-1050. You can join us inside of the lounge, the Bud Light Victor's Lounge. Drinks are on us. Food is on us. The atmosphere is on you, and the atmosphere the first 2 weeks has been outstanding. So just be caller number 7 at 734-998-1050. Be back on the other side here. Michigan Insider, MGoBlog Roundtable, Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
You
right.
guys know the song by John Prine, Donald and Lydia?
No.
I highly commend it vis-a-vis the Mel Tucker situation. It's right on the money, or
I
potentially.
don't need a
right-
Mel Tucker playlist.
Yeah, and if I was his attorney, this would be the Donald and Lydia defense. So
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see where they go next. You know, I don't
Do they have the
sense-
money to go? I mean, I guess they're going to
Mhm.
get Mel Tucker's money freed up, most of it, but
yeah,
know.
probably most of it. But I would be very. I mean, if they don't settle for some number, which I suggest they might, it'll be a litigation. And I don't think Michigan State is probably very interested in a litigation on this issue
you think Sharon Moore is going to get a call?
from Michigan State.
They can call Sharon Moore, but he's going to say it pass.
Yeah, I think Sharon Moore. Yeah, I would see unlikely. You know,
mean,
if I
that
was
was one of my
if I
friend's
was
ideas, and
Michigan
I was
State,
like-
I would hire Paul Christ.
I would love that.
I
That would be
mean,
amazing.
yeah, I would hire Paul Christ in a heartbeat because,
that'd be a good hire for them.
yeah, don't you think
Would
so?
that be a good hire?
Absolutely.
I think Paul Christ made one bad decision, and it turned out to be the crucial decision. He based his entire program on having the best quarterback recruit ever
Yeah.
at
We
that
do-
school, and it was a
Flew too high to the
miscalculation.
sun, man. You cannot have a quarterback at Wisconsin. It's
I know, but he's like the
gods will
quarterback's
punish
guy, and he looked at Graham Mertz and he's like, "I'm going to bank my program on this. Like, sign me up for that at Michigan State."
Yeah.
like-
Well, but here's the thing. I mean, Christ is a lot like Tommy Amaker. And regardless of Tommy's, you know, very mediocre results at Michigan, he was probably the right guy for Michigan at that time. I mean, he did sort of calm down a program that was pretty chaotic on the heels of Fisher and then Ellerby, who had some pretty bad dudes in the basketball program, some good dudes. Of course, the one really good dude he had, the NCAA took care of. And, you know, so to me, if they're serious, maybe they're not serious. If they're serious about being the new MSU, hire Paul Christ. Because he's a serious guy, he's an ethical guy, and he's a good football coach. He knows what he's doing. Yeah, the Mertz thing was a debacle, but by and large, that's, you know, I would say Cowboy days are over.
Weird that it
And
took this long for proliferation of Wisconsins around the Big Ten. Like they ran their program that way for so long, and now we finally have Bird at Illinois, and he had to go somewhere else to get back. Like there hasn't been another program other than Illinois that tried to Wisconsin it, right?
yeah,
Are any of you surprised that already it's looking like Brett is just he's flailing at Illinois this year? I don't think it's any coincidence that they got taken care of at Kansas. I think the reason they were successful was
it's
Ryan Walters.
Walter. Yeah,
Mhm.
could be right.
Yeah, their defense is completely fallen apart, and they still have like a couple of really good defensive linemen. So
Yeah, they have a first round pick in the defensive line.
Yep.
So I'm blocking on his name, but they have a kid there who's
Jerzon Newton.
yeah.
He goes by Johnny, and this drives Brian nuts.
I'm not going to call him Johnny when he's got such a cool name.
I think that
Back
dude's
in
a
1
beast.
minute, guys. 1 minute.
He's a beast.
He is.
Yeah.
He totally dump trucked El Hadi last year, and he was doing pretty well before that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you're right. They're not without talent there right now, but they don't
Yeah,
have
without
Ryan
Walters,
Yeah.
who went
And Kevin
down.
Witherspoon.
You know, they got. I think it was San Jose State beat them week 1. One of those state schools out in California beat them week 1. Threw it around the yard, and they went to Virginia Tech. And you knew they
Wasn't
were
it
going to
Fresno
fix
State?
that,
Sam?
huh?
I think it was Fresno State.
Fresno State. Yeah, they
Yeah.
fixed it. They weren't going to fix it, but they figured he'd patch it enough to be competent. And that's exactly what he did. They went down to Virginia Tech and beat Virginia Tech.
Yeah, the problem at Purdue is always going to be recruiting. You're not going to get that many Karloftises out of, West Lafayette. But if he can recruit reasonably, there's every reason to believe he's a really good coach.
Back in about 10 seconds, guys. Stand by.
Yeah, watching Karloftis against the Lions, I was still mad about that one.
And we are back in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side. Before we get back to the roundtable, want to let those of you who are in the market for a new vehicle know about the great deals to be had at Brighton Ford. Get on board with Brighton Ford and take advantage of great deals like the one on the 2023 Bronco Sport. Get into that great SUV for $228 a month, $3,500 down, or $355 a month with $500 down. Get a little bigger SUV like the 2023 Explorer, $282 a month with $3,500 down, or $419 a month with $500 down. And last but not least, that award-winning pickup, 46 or maybe it's 47 now years in a row, the 2023 F-150, $261 a month with $3,500 down, or $227 a month with $500 down. For those and other great deals, get on board with Brighton Ford by going to BrightonFord.com. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD. Make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. So, fellas, glad to be talking Michigan. I want to just get your broad stroke reaction. What are you encouraged by? What were you discouraged by? Week 2 versus UNLV, Brian Cook.
I mean, the same thing as everybody else, right? JJ is absolutely nuts. The defense looks impenetrable, and the run game is like, a little shaky.
Yeah. I mean, the defensive line is coming in, and our expectations were high. Like, we saw Mason Graham last year, and we're like, that's a true freshman. We saw Derek Moore last year, and we're like, that was just a true freshman. We saw Jenkins, and we're like, okay, now he's got another 20 pounds, and like, this is going to take off. We were high on the defensive line, and they're still coming in over expectations. And I loved the approach that Michigan had. I bet Jesse Minter called his dad and said, how did you guys deal with this kind of stuff back when people ran? Like, because it was wing T. It was all when I finally got to see what UNLV was running, it's wing T stuff, right? It's overload one side and then throw people in different directions to make your linebackers all go the wrong way. And the answer is take the linebackers out of the equation. Just have the linebackers come down to the line and force them to kind of get past your defensive line. And they couldn't. Michigan's defensive line, even if they got doubled, were just ripping through those guys and destroying it. And there was nowhere for UNLV to go. It was brilliant, and it's so unfair that you get to do that.
Yeah, Sam, I think you said that JJ's numbers weren't gaudy. To me, they're pretty gaudy. I mean, he's 48 of 55, maybe thrown 2 or 3 bad passes this year, if that. And that's gaudy. And if they were all check downs, that's one thing, but to be completing over 87% of your passes with more than almost 10.2 yards per attempt is like mind blowing. Now, maybe it's just ECU and UNLV are just that bad. But we've played bad teams in the past with good quarterbacks, and the numbers haven't looked like that to me. So that's number one. Yeah, number 2 is this looks like the best defensive tackle trio that I can remember in my lifetime, and sadly, that's a long lifetime. and I don't remember, having defensive tackles like that. And this week there was really good play. I thought on the edges from Moore and McGregor. And Harrell, who's, obviously been a very consistent player for Michigan. And so, yeah, I mean, this looks pretty good. And now we're all concerned about the run game, or I'm concerned about the run game. Let me speak for myself, because I know that I think it was Seth who's always stressed, or maybe Brian, about how good of a blocker Ronnie Bell is. And we saw a couple of plays, Seth, okay. We saw a couple of plays go by the wayside this week when wide receivers didn't, made non-blocks on the edges when the plays were otherwise well blocked. But I don't think it's just that.
There's a lot of individual issues. So there were a couple of well blocked plays where either Corum or Edwards didn't go in the right gap.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan is running a lot of outside zone, and it kind of feels like they got three guys who are hypothetically good at running outside zone, and then there's Hinton and Keegan, and that's really tough to like be consistent with. You got the wide receiver blocking is an issue. Michigan hasn't really fully implemented JJ McCarthy. I know he had a couple runs in this game, but only one was actually based on him reading off his zone read. There was one Corum run that went for a couple yards where he had to spin off a guy in the backfield because Michigan left an end unblocked. He went right at Corum, and JJ didn't keep it. And so it just feels like there's a lot of moving parts. They're trying to do a lot of things, and they've lost their identity a little bit. And they haven't run a pin and pull all year. They were very good at that last year. I'm a little bit confused by that. So it just feels like there's a multitude of issues, and there's not one quick fix.
I think so. A couple of things. I think you're absolutely right about how they, as far as run game is concerned, they need reps with these new guys that they have in the mix. Get the chemistry and cohesion down. So when they are running in the loaded boxes, guys that block 2 and 3 guys on a play like we saw all last year, right? That can happen more routinely. I think that's part of it. I think that getting Blake in the rhythm, I think they've done a pretty good job of that. I think, as much as they scheme a balance in touches, which they have, Blake has 30 through 2 games. Donovan has 27 through 2 games. I think getting Donovan some rhythm has to be about part of the strategy too. Maybe give him a, 2-3 touches in a row to try to help with that. And then the other piece, man, I think we gotta be a little patient with it. This is from our side because I think they're going to be patient with it. They went into that game as anticipated, saying we're going to work the perimeter run game, and that's what they did. And I felt like that was better. It wasn't great, like it wasn't ideal or optimal in terms of what we expect them to be, but it was better than week 1 when they said, okay, we need to get outside. Because I think that's why we didn't see pin and pulls. You watch against TCU, how they were leaking so bad on those pin and pulls in that game. And I think that's why we didn't see it in these first 2 games. I think we're going to see it moving forward. And I think we're going to see them be a better run team with time. I'm kind of curious you guys' take on the tackle battle, though. We talked about this last week. Brian, I think you spoke about it the most. Here's Sharon Moore, and you watch how it unfolded on the field. There wasn't a rotation. We didn't see Trente and Darius at the tackle spots until the 4th quarter.
Yep.
And so what that says to me is the job for now at least has been decided. And if the run blocking, which is okay, if that would lend itself to having more competition at the position that there isn't, tells me that, man, they must be really ahead as pass blockers. And you look at them as pass blockers at the tackle position, they've been really, really good.
Yeah, they have. Level of competition is a bit of a question mark, but especially this week, I don't think I had a pass pro minus for him at all. And Michigan's dropping back quite a bit, especially on standard downs. So that helps a little bit because they're not just teeing off on 3rd down. But Michigan had a lot of true passing downs because the ground game wasn't really working. So, Trente did have some issues last year early in the season. A couple of them were mental. Like he had a couple of I seemed like he didn't have the right play call. So if you're looking at this season and you're like, okay, what's the one thing that can really derail it? An injury to JJ McCarthy. What's literally the most important thing? Not getting JJ McCarthy hit.
Right.
From that perspective, I understand it. If my grading last year for Trente was very, very good in 6 games, and PFF also liked him a lot, and he seems to be playing pretty well as that bonus OL. So it's a little confusing to me. And one thing that if you promise these guys, you say in a press conference that they're going to get a start in week 2, and then they don't get a start in week 2, that probably feels pretty bad for them. So I'm not exactly sure what the thinking was that went into that. But Sharon Moore's obviously earned the benefit of the doubt here.
Yeah, I have a question for both of you guys, just briefly. I mean, is it? Do you feel like outside zone is a plausible staple for this team? Because I'm not so sure, because it's
Yeah,
You
I mean,
gotta
I
work
wrote my article on this week. Like,
Oh, you
I
did?
think that
Okay.
they're grasping. I think that they're trying to be the greatest offensive line of all time.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
one thing you can do to like get back what they want with what they want to run is duo, and they're trying to find things that they can run enough that teams cannot just tee off on their favorite play. And then,
But I mean,
yeah.
if you just run power, I mean, there's plenty of ways to get people who are expecting duo in bad spots that don't involve installing the most complicated run play in football.
Right.
Like,
Right.
I mean, it feels like they thought that they had duo down. They had all the inside zone down. They had all the gap stuff down. So what they're going to do is they're going to all right, let's add the outside zone. And I'm just like, dude, this is college. Like, maybe if it was an NFL team and these guys aren't going to class and they've been in the league for 8 years, you can do all that stuff maybe. But even in the NFL, outside zone teams tend to be very, very heavy outside zone first and foremost. And to me, I mean, I would rather have Jim Harbaugh thinking up ways to get gap block plays that look weird and put people in the wrong gaps than
Yeah.
Yeah.
because there's no Jim Harbaugh advantage when you're running outside zone.
Mhm.
Because Harbaugh has all the kinds of stuff in his playbook, trap blocks, whams, like crazy plays where I'm looking at last year where I'm like, this is an intentional cutback because the puller is attacking a defensive tackle who's already being blocked and the linebacker's in the raw gap. All that stuff that Harbaugh has brought from the Paleolithic era of football goes away if you're just Mike DeBoarding it. And I understand why they want to run outside zone, but it feels like a bridge too far.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much progress they make there. They seem committed to expanding the perimeter run game as an answer to what teams are doing to them inside. There are other ways to get outside. We saw it in the game. I mean, we saw them get JJ on the edge in this game, right? You want to use that judiciously. But that's one of the answers. We saw them hit a reverse with CJ in this game, one of those U-turn plays, so that we saw Ronnie score on last year. So they figuring out ways to get outside is a real thing, but it sounds like outside zone, at least for now. You rep it and you see if you can get good enough at it to feel like it can be a staple. If it's not, I assume they'll pivot from it. But for now, it seems like something that they're committed to working on.
It's an expensive thing to just to get to where they've gotten already. It's an expensive thing. So they've already burned a lot of practice time this year on repping outside zone because you don't get to just being as good as they are at it. They've been practicing it a lot. So it's already sunk cost fallacy. If it's not working, you got to throw it out. But you can tell that they've already burned a lot of practice time on it.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical, to be honest. I'm sort of with Brian on this. I think it's a bridge too far. A movie I actually watched a bit of last night, and I think that it may be just too much. That it puts too much on their plate, and it's I'm skeptical they're going to be able to do it. And I'm also skeptical that you can run this sort of offense, these sort of spread offenses, without the quarterback running the ball at least some. And if teams figure out or decide JJ ain't running the ball, I think it makes it difficult for the run game to go. So
Yeah,
there are other
they're just being
perimeter run
judicious with
games,
it.
right? You can run bash. You can run a screen. You're still allowed to run screens, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
they
fair.
still don't do slip screens on this team for some reason. So
They
there's
hit a
lot
big
of
one
things
against
that they can
Illinois
do.
last year, so it's there. I mean, they're obviously holding a lot back too, and
Yeah,
they're
they're
using
holding
this
stuff
game. These first couple games is just more confirmation that okay, we're using these as we're gonna work on some stuff games, right? I mean, they can RPO, they can pin and pull.
Do we know they could RPO?
Yeah, they didn't run any RPOs last year, very few, and they run none this year, maybe one.
JJ to me showed enough when they did RPO, showed enough, especially with the increased confidence that they're showing in him with his pre-snap menu, to believe that they can RPO. Now, maybe that belief will be proven, overconfidence, to be overconfidence later on. But I believe they have that in the arsenal, and they made the choice to use this portion of practice. Right, we're talking about the economy of plays, to use the economy of plays in these first couple of games we're going to work on our perimeter run game, thinking that we got this other stuff that we can hold back for when we face more serious competition.
I mean, to me, I don't like that. To me, it feels like you should rep the things that you're good at and keep repping them, because just because you're good at something doesn't mean you're perfect at it. And I feel like trying to expand the playbook so much that you're just kind of average-ish at everything is not the recipe for a college team. But again, Sharon Moore has really earned the benefit of the doubt, so maybe it'll get cleaned up the next couple of weeks, and we'll be like, hey guys, remember when we thought Michigan's ground game was bad?
I mean, there is a possibility that they actually get this down, and then we're like, okay, this is the greatest blocking team of all time.
I mean, there was that season where Michigan was running for 2.9 yards a carry against Army, and then kind of Harbaugh's like, all right, this is what we're doing, and then they run for 300 yards in a rainstorm against Notre Dame later in that year. Mm-hmm. So just because there's some bumps early in the year doesn't mean that this can't get figured out, especially with a Jim Harbaugh team.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think you said one very true and subtle thing, that I think in teaching anything, the student needs to work more on his strengths than his weaknesses. And this, I mean, and in tennis, when I'm teaching there, I always work more on a student's strengths than weaknesses, because you want them to be really, really good at something, as opposed to sort of okay at everything. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about this. I'm a bit worried about the run game. I'm a bit worried about the seeming obsession with outside zone. I'm probably wrong. I hope I am, but I'm worried about it.
I mean, it could be a fourth pitch. It's against UNLV, it was their second pitch, and you can't. If it's going to be your second pitch, you have to be able to beat someone who's looking for it, right? Like if you're going to throw a curve every once in a while, they'll jelly leg the guy the first time he sees it. But if he's sitting on a curve, it's got to be good enough for him to swing through it, and their outside zone is not good enough for someone who's sitting on it.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how good they get at it, and if they feel like it's not good enough, what the answer is at that point. But this getting outside seems to be their biggest answer, at least so far, to what teams are doing to them. But it's just it makes total sense to me that if this winds up not being a positive experiment, that a big part of the answer, even if this is a positive outcome here, that they're going to RPO some more. They're going to do that. I just can't, with all the trust they put into JJ and how effectively he's executing every aspect of the offense. The first play of the game where he checks it down to Blake, right? I mean, JJ, he's going for, he's probably trying to get it to Roman on the flag, right? Because you can make the case that with his arm, maybe he's getting it, even though there's a retreating corner who's dropping back. He made the right decision. He drops it down, he gets a 20-yard gain out of it. The dude is making every right call. Every right call. You can't tell me that they don't trust him enough to RPO. Of course they do. I think they're just holding it back.
But if that's a direction they want to go, wouldn't we see some of it? Wouldn't they want to rep some of it during games? I mean, that's why I'm skeptical.
Looks, I got a lot of questions still to ask about different things. I haven't asked a direct question about the tackle battle or anything like that. Just asking people around the program, in the program. But it was made very plain to me They held, I mean, not just a little back, a lot back. And now, will that be foolhardy in the grand scheme of things? I mean, time will tell. Time will tell. You know, I'm not saying that that's the best decision, but it's their decision, and we'll see. It may be the best decision in the long haul, based on the, you know, how well they know the team and the experience they have on the team. You know,
how long are they going to hold this back? Because they're not going to be less than a 2-touchdown favorite until Penn State, right? Like,
or maybe they just add a little more each week.
Maybe
they just add a little more each week up to that point.
I'm not worried about the RPO part, just because the RPO you have to practice against a certain defense. So like you have to, otherwise you can't practice it against everybody, right? You have to know where their safeties are, their linebackers are, and know who you're going to be reading.
Right, and plus you want to take some big shots, right? You want to take some big shots. The play action gets you there. You know, he could have called 20 more play actions. It just felt like every time he called it, it was a big play there. It's hard not to do that over and over again when it's working so well. So, fellas, score. Give me your score. Michigan Bowling Green, starting with you, Craig Ross.
Let's see. Vance said 42-9. I'm going 44-6.
Okay. Sorry, Lefty. What do you got, Seth?
45 to 2.3.
All right. And Brian Cook. Brian Cook, what you got?
24-20.
Ooh.
Sandbagging it. They're going to sandbag it.
We already have one Bowling Green fan on here. What do we got? Another one?
No, I got if he's not going to rep Leffler, I'll rep him.
Good. Thank you.
Not just Leffler, it's Morrison that you're repping there.
Yeah. All right, guys. We got to get out early today. So appreciate the time. Another great roundtable. We will see you next week on the MGoBlog Roundtable. We'll see you tomorrow here